Imagine a landlocked country with a naval fleet of 5,000 sailors, where the capital beats at 13,000 feet, up in the sky, a place that filled the treasuries of all Europe with silver, but remained one of the poorest on the South American continent, where nobody wants to stay. Welcome to Bolivia, where women with bowler hats and voluminous skirts don't parade on runways, but climb into the ring to fight like professional warriors against men. Where the main city La Paz sits in the crater of an extinct volcano. Where you go to work by cable car, flying above the chaos of the streets below. Where Tinku is a festival where blood flows for the harvest. Where ancient traditions live on in bare-knuckle fights between rival villages that challenge each other. This is a country whose inhabitants literally line up to leave. More than a quarter of the population would admit to leaving immediately if they had the opportunity. I traveled through this impossible nation where even Venezuelan refugees prefer to go elsewhere. Where only 1% of the population is foreign. An absolute South American record low today. You'll discover why Bolivians themselves want to flee their country, why this land extremely rich in resources, gas, lithium, silver, is paralyzed in the most total and absurd poverty. Forget everything you know about normal nations. I'm taking you to a world where every step is a small victory against altitude, where every breath reminds you of something. If you want to understand how a natural paradise becomes an economic hell, how corruption becomes a system, not the exception, how ancient traditions resist the total collapse of the state, hit like and subscribe. This journey will show you a country of paradoxes where cosmic beauty coexists with mass exodus, where nobody wants to stay but everyone remembers. 12. Welcome to the roof of the world. You've arrived in La Paz, Bolivia. The first thing that hits you won't be the local color or the beauty of the Andean mountains. It'll hit you with physical reality. A reality at 11,935 feet above sea level. The air here is as light as a corrupt politician's promises. Every step is a small victory against gravity. Every breath is a reminder that you're no longer in your European comfort zone. This is called soroche, altitude sickness, your free ticket to a world of altered consciousness. I walked through the streets of La Paz on the first day. After 100 meters, I had to stop, heart pounding hard, head spinning, nausea rising from my empty stomach. Bolivians looked at me smiling. For them, it's normal. They were born here. Their lungs have adapted for generations. For you foreigner, it's total and immediate physical shock. This is why Bolivians understood what mayors of world megalopolises will never understand. Why stay stuck in traffic when you can fly above everything by cable car? La Paz's Teleférico isn't a tourist attraction. It's the largest urban cable car network in the entire world. Daily public transportation for hundreds of thousands of people. Imagine leaving home, getting in a cabin, and gliding above the chaos of the streets, above poor neighborhoods and rich areas, watching the city's life like a deity. Cheap, fast, and with $1 million view. This is how you solve problems when you live in a giant bowl of an extinct volcano, when geography forces you to be creative. 11. The silver that enriched Europe. But here the vertigo doesn't just come from altitude. It comes from tragic history. Not far from here is the city of Potosí and its mountain Cerro Rico, which means rich mountain. Since the 15th century, Spanish conquistadors have extracted silver by the ton, literally tons and tons of precious metal that changed world history. That silver financed European wars, built palaces in Madrid and Seville, created a Spanish world empire. And here's the most important point of all modern Bolivian history. Bolivia has always known how to feed other people's empires, but has never managed to build its own. Today, history repeats itself, only now it's not the fault of colonial Spain, but of its own corrupt, weak and voracious power. That same power why people try to leave, why even refugees don't want to stay here. You know the saying, those who love stay. Well, in Bolivia, even those born here don't want to stay. More than a quarter of the population admits it openly, without any shame. If they had the opportunity, they'd leave immediately. And these aren't empty words. Today, Bolivia is the country with the fewest foreigners in all of South America. Even refugees avoid it completely. Venezuelans go to Brazil, Haitians seek opportunities in Chile, but nobody chooses Bolivia as a final or even temporary destination. The figures are relentless and brutal. Just over 1% of the population are foreigners, a minimally low record in the region. This includes everyone, legal and illegal migrants together. 10. Mass exodus from your own country. The reason isn't just one, it's a complete knot of unresolved problems feeding each other. Stagnant economy stuck for decades, politics collapsed along with it without hope, education incapable of giving even basic knowledge. Around 6% of the adult population is still illiterate today. Youth between 18 and 35 look at their country and see emptiness instead of future. How is it possible that a land with inexhaustible resources, gas, lithium, extremely rich nature and tourism is completely paralyzed in total poverty? The answer is harsh and painful. Power, systemic corruption that devours everything, has stopped being an exception to become a system rooted at every level of the Bolivian state. It lives in municipalities, ministries and Congress. You see it in contracts for schools that were never built, in hospitals where essential medicines for patients are always missing, even in asphalt that disintegrates with the first seasonal rain. Here, power has stopped being a guarantee and has transformed into a curse. That's why people flee desperately. I talked with young graduates earning 300 euros a month. They told me, there's no future here. We want to go to Argentina, to Chile, to the United States, anywhere but here. Their parents sacrificed everything to pay for their university. Now they watch their children leave, families divided, talents lost, brain drain toward countries that offer what Bolivia can't give. But in the midst of this total chaos, there exists a force impossible to ignore. A force that for centuries has kept the country afloat despite all crises. It's Bolivian women. 9. The Cholitas, queens of the Andes. Forget everything you knew about women. Forget gym models and office ladies in formal suits. In Bolivia, the standard of strength and style is completely different. Meet the Cholitas, the women of Bolivia who have become symbols of the country and its traditions. Their image is an entire story. Wide, multi-layered, colorful polera skirt, a brightly colored manta shawl, and the famous bowler hat. Where did this bowler hat on the Andes come from? Legend says that in the 1800s they brought a batch of hats for British engineers, but they turned out too small for their heads. The clever merchant convinced local women it was the latest Parisian fashion. Thus, an authentic new Bolivian tradition was born. Today, the position of the bowler hat on a Cholita's head equals her marital status. Straight means married, sideways means single or widowed. A real symbol clearer than any ring. But the hat is just the tip of the cultural iceberg. Cholitas are guardians of Bolivian culture and masters of its economy, markets, street commerce, small and large family businesses. They're the ones who keep everything afloat. Men can theoretically be presidents, but real power here in the streets belongs completely to the women of Bolivia who always work hard. And now the most interesting thing, Cholitas luchadoras, women in traditional dress and braids who climb into the ring and organize a show similar to Mexican or American professional wrestling. For tourists, it's culture shock. But for the Cholitas themselves, it all started as protest. Protest against machismo, violence and humiliation. They suffered every day for centuries without a voice. 8. Warriors in the ring. In the ring, the Cholita is a true warrior. She jumps from the ropes, executes hard holds, and throws down male rivals. Every fight is a symbolic challenge. We're strong. We can defend ourselves. The crowd of women in the stands reacts with a storm of emotions because they see in the ring not just athletes, they see themselves, their mothers, their grandmothers who suffered. This is more than sport. It's a Bolivian cultural phenomenon. It's a cry of freedom, encoded in blows and holds. So if you're ever in a Bolivian market and see a sweet old lady with a hat, don't rush to get too soft. Last night she might have participated in a real Cholita fight. Tomorrow open a new business. These women are the pure force of the nation that resists despite everything. I attended a Cholita fight in El Alto. The atmosphere was electric. Andean music at maximum volume. People shouting, Cholitas literally flying from the top ropes of the ring. A woman about 50 years old threw down a 30-year-old man. The crowd exploded. I understood in that moment that this wasn't tourist entertainment but something much deeper. It was collective revenge. It was a declaration of strength. It was a clear message. We're not victims. We're warriors. Bolivia may collapse, but we women resist and always fight to the end. The next day, that same Cholita was working in her fabric shop. She smiled at me, sold me an Andean blanket, no trace of the ring violence, just an efficient businesswoman. This duality is the essence of Bolivia. Tradition and modernity, sweetness and toughness, survival through constant adaptation to the impossible conditions that life here imposes daily without any mercy. 7. Salar de Uyuni mirror of the sky. Bolivia knows how to surprise even the most experienced travelers. Just look at Salar de Uyuni, salt desert with endless white horizon that burns your eyes under the sun. But in the rainy season, a true natural miracle happens. A thin layer of water covers the surface. Uyuni transforms into a giant mirror that perfectly reflects the sky without distortion. Sky and earth merge completely. You walk as if you were above the clouds. This is the place where photographs become legendary, where landscapes seem from another planet. Not by chance they call Salar de Uyuni the portal to another world. I was there at dawn. The sun was rising. The sky was turning pink-orange. The water mirror reflected everything. It was impossible to understand where earth ended and sky began. We drove through this infinite reflective whiteness, sensation of flying in cosmic space without gravity anchoring you to earth. Tourists from all over the world come here for this unique experience. Japanese, Europeans, Americans, all taking impossible photos where you seem to walk on clouds or touch the sky with hands stretched upward. 6. Lake Titicaca sacred to the Incas. And here's Lake Titicaca, the world's highest navigable lake and Bolivia's sacred place. In Inca legends, it was precisely from here that their first rulers emerged, the children of the divine sun. Today its waters shine with unreal blue. The air is full of mysticism. On the floating islands of the Uros, families still live whose traditions count centuries of history. Tourists come here not just for beauty, but also for encounter with culture that seems eternal, unchangeable despite advancing modernity. I visited a floating island of the Uros, built entirely with reeds. The family living there explained to me how they build these islands. Layers and layers of interwoven totora reeds, When the lower layers rot, they add new ones on top, so the island floats. They live off fishing and tourism. Children play on the reeds, women weave, men fish with ancient methods transmitted from generation to generation without ever significant changes over time. But here too modernity arrives. Solar panels for electricity, cell phones to communicate with mainland, young people who want to leave toward cities to study and work, leaving traditions behind. The Bolivian dilemma again, tradition versus progress, stay or leave, preserve culture or seek better future elsewhere. No easy answers, only painful choices that divide entire families and communities. Bolivia's mysticism lives not only in landscapes, but also in its people. One of the most ancient rituals is the Tinku festival, meeting of villages where by tradition, ritual fights are organized. Bare-knuckle fights between men from different villages. It's not just a party, it's a way to honor Pachamama, Mother Earth, so she gives abundant harvest. The atmosphere of this act is unique. Music, dances, symbols. 5. Tinku Festival of Blood. Even if to external eyes it may seem violent. For Bolivians, Tinku is part of cultural memory, a bond that unites past and present. I attended a Tinku in a remote village. The men were really hitting each other hard, blood flowing from broken noses, teeth flying. Yet nobody stopped the fight. Women sang, encouraging their men to fight valiantly. They explained to me that the spilled blood feeds Pachamama. More blood flows, better the harvest will be. Pre-Incan tradition that survives despite the Catholic Church, despite modern government that would like to ban it. This is deep Bolivia that tourists don't see, where ancestral traditions resist, where Western logic doesn't apply, where life and death, violence and fertility are intertwined in incomprehensible ways. After the fight, everyone drank together. Enemies of 5 minutes before became brothers, shared chicha, fermented corn beer, laughed, hugged, blood still fresh on smiling and satisfied faces. I asked a fighter why he does it. He looked at me as if I were crazy. For Pachamama, for my village, for my ancestors. How can you not ask? This is our life. That night I understood that Bolivia is a country where European rationality shatters, where other logics exist as ancient as the mountains themselves, dominating the horizon. 4. A fleet without a sea. And now the main enigma that sounds like a joke but is national tragedy. A fleet without sea access. Sounds like an absurd joke, but for Bolivia, it's an open wound for 140 years. In 1884, after the War of the Pacific, the country lost its coastal shoreline. It remained locked inside the continent without ocean access, but it has never resigned itself to this loss. Bolivia's constitution still states the yearning to recover ocean access. Every year, on March 23rd here, they celebrate Sea Day with official ceremonies and national emotion. That day, impressive military parades take place. School children sing songs about the lost coast. In politicians' speeches resonates hope for justice that perhaps one day will be returned by history. And yes, Bolivia has real naval forces, a true fleet based on Lake Titicaca and the larger rivers, about 5,000 sailors, many of whom have never seen the ocean in their lives. I visited the naval base on Titicaca. Sailors in uniform training on small boats, Bolivian flag waving, commanders talking about naval strategies without having a sea where to actually apply them. It's a symbol of resistance and unshakable will. They showed me the ships with pride. We have the right to the sea. We'll take it back. It's a matter of historical justice, not contingent politics. Recently, Peru leased Bolivia a stretch of coast for 99 years. Perhaps the dream of an entire nation has come a little closer to concrete and tangible reality. But for now, it remains a dream. Sailors who don't see ocean, fleet that navigates lakes, country that lost the sea but keeps hope alive through generations that have never touched salt water. 3. Economy paralyzed in wealth. How is it possible that land with inexhaustible resources is paralyzed in poverty? Natural gas, lithium for future batteries, silver that build empires, copper, tin, zinc, everything under Bolivian soil. Yet GDP per capita is among the lowest in South America. The answer is always the same: systemic corruption that devours everything, politicians who steal, officials who demand bribes, inflated contracts, phantom projects, money that disappears. I talked with a local entrepreneur who wanted to open a lithium processing factory. He told me that for every permit he had to pay bribes. In the end, he gave up. Too complicated, too expensive, too much corruption at every level. Better to emigrate to Chile and open business there, where at least the system works, even if imperfect but predictable. This is a story that repeats thousands of times. Lost talents, wasted opportunities, wealth that remains underground while population suffers above, young graduates working as waiters or emigrating permanently. The 6% adult illiteracy is a symptom. Educational system that doesn't work. Schools without books, underpaid teachers doing second jobs to survive, students who drop out to help family. Hospitals where basic medicines are missing. I visited a public hospital in La Paz, patients sleeping in corridors, families bringing food from home because cafeteria didn't work, desperate doctors without instruments. Roads that fall apart with first rain, terrible quality asphalt because in contracts someone stole half the budget, nobody controls, nobody punishes. System perpetuates itself for decades without change. Bolivia is a perfect example of the resource curse. When you have too much natural wealth, politicians fight to control it, corruption explodes, institutions weaken, country collapses despite or perhaps because of it. 2. Youth without future. Youth between 18 and 35 look at their country and see only emptiness, no prospects for serious career, miserable salaries, corruption everywhere, growing violence in main cities. I met a group of university students in La Paz, all studying engineering, economics, medicine, all planning to leave as soon as they graduated. Nobody believed they could build a future here in their homeland. They told me, "We love Bolivia, we love our culture, our mountains, our people, but we can't live on love for landscapes when we can't find dignified work. In Argentina, we earn triple, in Chile quadruple, in the United States 10 times more. Why should we stay here to suffer when we can help families from afar sending money every month?" This is modern Bolivian drama. Patriotism versus survival. Love for native land versus brutal economic necessities. Impossible choice that no young person should ever have to make in life. Remittances from emigrants sustain Bolivian economy. Billions of dollars arriving from abroad. Children sending money to parents who stayed. Brothers supporting sisters. Families divided but economically united. Without these remittances, Bolivia would completely collapse. Final paradox, the country survives thanks to those who leave. Those who stay depend on those who leave. Success means emigration, not staying. The elderly remain alone. I saw old people in Andean villages abandoned by children who left. They wait for rare visits, live on money sent, die surrounded by photos of never met grandchildren who live. In Buenos Aires or Miami or Madrid, this is the price of mass emigration, destroyed families, traditions that are lost, villages that slowly die, while young people seek better life elsewhere. 1. The country nobody chooses. Bolivia is South America's most tragic paradox. It possesses everything to be paradise: spectacular nature, Salar de Uyuni, Titicaca, Amazon, infinite mineral resources, culture extremely rich and unique in the world. Yet nobody chooses it. Bolivians flee, foreigners avoid, refugees prefer other countries. Only 1% of the population is foreign. Absolute minimum record. that says everything about this country's reputation. I traveled through Bolivia, and every day I saw contradictions. Beauty built on poverty, infinite resources with starving population, traditions that resist while state collapses, stubborn hope amid total chaos. The lesson is clear. Natural resources don't guarantee prosperity. Beauty doesn't guarantee happiness. Having everything means nothing without functioning institutions, without serious fight against corruption, devouring the country. Bolivia is a warning. It shows how paradise becomes hell when corruption replaces management, when politicians steal instead of serving, when young people must choose between homeland and economic survival. Hit like, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you go live in Bolivia? Or do you understand why everyone wants to flee? This is the country without sea with naval fleet, where nobody stays.